Why can this guy play a 20-year-long ongoing campaign with barely any breaks, while some of us have to wait 1 year in between games? I've played multiple games of D&D throughout the years. Some were awesome and some were awful. And after scratching my head for a very long time, I think I finally figured out why. I'll let you in on a secret. One of those reasons explain why D&D has been so successful in the past 4 years, breaking an all-time high in sales last year. So why can Critical Role become a multi-million-dollar company playing D&D games that are so good that hundreds of thousands of people tune in every week just to listen to it, while so many of us can barely get a campaign started? To figure out why, we have to break it down. In 1974, Gary Gygax published Tactical Studies Role, which later became D&D. What is D&D? Well, it's a game where you collect dice until you develop a crippling addiction and your partner leaves you. More importantly, it's a group game. This means that you're gathered around a table, or a virtual one, with some of your friends to go and hunt down some monsters and live some epic stories. But the fact that it is a group game is actually a bigger deal than you think. Do you know what is the deciding factor in knowing if someone will stick to a gym program or not? It's creating friends and the social group in that gym. So if being in a group can make you stick to the gym, do you think it can make you stick to a D&D game? You're goddamn right. We are social creatures, no matter how introverted we might be. There is literal scientific research going on right now linking depression and loneliness. So being part of a group like this makes you happy, you release endorphins, so that's the reason D&D is so popular, right? Well, partly. It's one key point that explains some of it, but when you look at the multitude of games that are created, tabletop or not, there are plenty of them which are created specifically for multiplayer, and yet so many fall into oblivion. In addition, in D&D specifically, there are so many groups that have banded and disbanded that it's not enough of an explanation. So we need something more. There's another key aspect of D&D that we're missing, and it's the fact that it's a role-playing game. In this game, I'm not Evan. In this game, I'm a monster hunter. I play in the courts of kings and queens. I do things that I could never do in the real world. Like casting fireball on my annoying neighbor. Not only that, but these characters grow and react based on their environment. Very much like in the real world. I get a sense of progression and success. I make lifelong friends, and I go to the depth of hell for them, and them for me. The deeper I can build my character, and the richer the experience that I'm going to receive, and the more enjoyment I'm going to get out of the game. In D&D, we're truly building characters. We're not just building stick figures that run around and fight. The importance of character building cannot be underestimated. We look for good characters everywhere. In our movies, in our shows, or at our own D&D games. That's part of the charm of the game. You get to be this powerful figure that can shape the world. And I think this kind of escapism has some real appeal compared to our very limited selves in the real world, where many of us feel helpless. In stark contrast to these characters that we embody. Especially in today's age of social media, where every day we see people doing crazier and crazier things that we could never hope to achieve. How can this guy have the motivation to go and cross an indomitable river whilst blind, while I barely have the motivation to wake up in the morning? But in D&D I can. I can be this epic hero who does these crazy things. And that has a very real appeal. I think that appeal applies to video games in general, but it certainly applies to D&D. So is that the answer as to why some D&D games are better than others? Is it only about us creating in-depth character that we get attached to and can do insane things? That's why Critical Role is so loved, right? The depth and intensity that they bring to their character. Across all tabletops, Call of Cthulhu, Pathfinder and more, creating cool characters is part of the appeal. Yeah, that makes sense. That's the reason why RPGs are so popular. Character depth.
That's going to be Riz.
Cool. How big is this thing's butthole? Goblin sized?
Yes. Its butthole is goblin.
Riz is fucking diving in head first.
Okay, I might be missing something. There is one other thing that is worth mentioning though. Do you know what is in common in between D&D, Pokemon and Fortnite? If you say not a lot, you'd be right. But there is one thing. These are games which are fairly easy to get into, but yet hide a lot of layers of complexity that you wouldn't think of. One of the reasons people keep coming back to D&D is not only because of the cool things you can do, but it's also because of the number of ways in which you can do these things. Sure, you can whack an enemy with a sword until it dies, but you can also cast Fireball, Or you can also push them off a cliff and dive bomb with them and ignore the damage because you're a raging barbarian. But back then, D&D was even more complex. Like, a lot more complex. In 3.5e, there were so many supplement books that you could buy. It was thousands upon thousands of pages of game, which was great for people who enjoyed the complex gameplay, but not so awesome for new people who wanted to get into the hobby and were gatekept by this absurd complexity. 5e did away with all of that in favor of a much more simplistic gameplay, which still holds a lot of options, and gives players the option to tinker with their games to add cool new monster items and rules to add this additional depth to their games. You can find plenty of those on my Patreon, by the way. So why did the designers phase out some of the complexity of the rules? Yes, it was to attract a new audience with an easier to enter game, but it was also so that games could focus on a more story-driven adventure. Which brings me to my next point, and probably the most important one. None of the previous points I've mentioned make a difference if you don't have a good story. That is where D&D is great at, especially 5e. It gives everyone the tools to create an amazing story. No matter if that story is told for your 5-year-old or for a very mature audience, there is a story out there for everybody. That is why Matt Mercer is acclaimed as one of the best DMs. Yes, he has tremendous voice acting skills, and his platform is absolutely huge, but that very platform of millions of followers was built because he was good at telling stories. It's stories that are so good that thousands of people have banded together to create an animated series for it, in a record time and in a record amount. And this reason is why D&D saw a resurrection from the ashes. If you look at the charts, it was steadily going down. And with the introduction of 5e, they left the wargaming at the door in favor of a more streamlined rule set, which allowed for greater storytelling. And stories are what keep you hooked for more, especially when that story is about you. Long gone are the days where character death was just part of the game and you would change character sheet just like Romania would change government. It means very often. Now times are different. People are very attached to their character, the heroes of the story. And the character death is often something to truly shed a tear about. Just like when one of your favorite characters dies in a show. And this is a crucial thing that each and every DM and player should keep in mind. D&D nowadays, with all its cool mechanics and fun things to do, is first and foremost a game with a story to tell. And as such, a good story is what makes or breaks most campaigns. You can see this in video games with RPGs, where story is the most important point and the thing that will keep the player hooked through the thousands of hours of gameplay. Yeah, okay, maybe I don't know anything. But to go through those stories in the most enjoyable of ways, it is crucial to know what makes a good character. And if you want to learn that, click on this video. Until next time.